Good morning. I am your host, Mary James Mutua, and welcome to the Royal Family Show. The family unit is very important to God. The greatest battle that is being fought in our day-to-day is the battle against the home and the family. We are seeing the grim results of the attacks every day. Children that are lost and are confused, reaching out to one another for love and consolation, hence teenage pregnancies and teenage sex. We're seeing lots of drug addiction in the family, alcoholism, abortions, and the list goes on and on. But despite these great attacks, God has got a great and a wonderful plan for the family. He desires that not only our families survive, but that they flourish. On set today is Pastor Othniel Mwabili and Pastor Nancy Mwabili. Welcome very much. Kindly introduce yourselves to our viewers.
Shalom, and thank you very much indeed. My name is Othniel Mwabili. I'm a senior pastor of City Revival Temple, a congregation that meets in the city.
Yes.
And it's a great joy to be here to talk about the family and to talk about God's purpose of restoration and bringing back into line and into order so that we may fulfill the purposes of God in our season.
Thank you, Mary. My name is Nancy. I'm married to Pastor Mwabili, so I minister alongside him. And I'm also a human resource professional, and I'm a certified coach. And I'm happy to be here.
Thank you for joining us this morning. The family unit is very important to God. I believe that the greatest battle that is being fought today is the battle against the home and against the family. We must learn how to protect our families from these evil attacks and learn how to seize victory for our families. Now we're going back to the Garden of Eden. We know that before God created the man, or when he finished creating everything, on the sixth day he created the man. But before he had created the man, he first prepared a place for them. And the place, according to the scriptures, is called the Garden of Eden. It was a place full of the presence of God. It was a wonderful place. I'll start with you, Othniel, Pastor Othniel Mwabili. Can you explain to us on how God's presence, when allowed into our family, influences a family to be successful?
Yeah, thank you very much, Mary. Actually, it's a very important question. Because families are very important to God because they actually are the foundation, the building block. Because when you consider God's original purpose for man was that man may multiply, replenish, occupy, and dominate on the earth. For that to actually take place, then the family was actually the unit that actually was going to implement that plan. And so no wonder then the family is most attacked, as it were, because if you can attack the family, if you can undermine the family, then you actually undermine the eternal purposes of God through the family or through human beings. And that's why in our day-to-day, there's all this attack and barrage of various attacks and alternative styles to actually attack the family, whether it comes in the form of pro-choice and abortion. It's really attacking the family, attacking the issue of multiplication, giving a different type of morality to explain this thing. It's really against God, whether it's talking about the LGBT community. Here, the family is being redefined, but now this family cannot really multiply, cannot increase because it has no original purpose. And so the enemy is really trying to bring pleasure into the family without multiplication, without replenishment, and without husbanding or taking care or taking to the next level, and without exercising dominion in the environment. And I believe that in our day, there are three very important institutions. The first one, of course, is family. Then there is the church, and there's a governance. Governance here, you're talking about the structures by which men actually are able to rule themselves, are able to exercise dominion in the environment. But at the core is the family. So whatever happens to the family eventually affects the church. And as goes the church, so goes the governance system, so goes the nation. And so it becomes very important that family is in order and in place. And I believe we need to get our families back in place. We need to get the glory back in the family. We need to get the oil back. And in fact, incidentally, it's interesting to note that when Christ is crying and praying, he's also in a garden at the time of redemption. Yes. And this time, it's playing out in the Garden of Gethsemane. Yes. Now, the interesting thing here is that Gethsemane is a word that means the place of pressing oil. You know, so it's like there's a production of oil that will bring restoration, oil that will bring healing. You know, because oil makes things run smooth. Oil is a fuel, it's a re-energizing component. And so Christ is at an oil pressed, so that his life can be pressed, so that now there shall be healing and restoration brought back to this man, so that he can go back to the original intention of God, and so then they can be the purposes of God fulfilled. So we can understand it's not really about us, it's about God.
Yeah. Wow. We know that their stay in the Garden of Eden was not long. You know, the enemy was very successful in getting them out of that atmosphere, of the very presence of God, the very place that they were meant to thrive, to flourish, and to prosper, the very place that their family was supposed to be molded and become everything that God meant it to be, reach their destiny fullness. Explain to us, Pastor Nancy, how did the fall affect the well-being of the family? Because I'm sure after they left Eden, life was never the same again.
In fact, Mary, the redemption of man did not start so many thousands of years after the Garden of Eden. We see right there in the Garden of Eden, after everybody had gone ahead and was pointing a finger at one another, of course refusing to take responsibility, God in his great mercy, being the God that he is, he still had so much compassion upon the man and the woman who he had created, in as much as they had disobeyed him and sinned against him. Because as he talks to the woman, because of course we see he had a word for each one of them after the fall, he says that he talks to the woman and tells the woman that your seed shall crush the head of the serpent. And right there is where we see the starting of the redemption of man. Because of course so many thousands of years after, we see Christ being born, and we could say so that he was the seed of a woman.
Yes.
Because he was conceived in a woman's womb. So God did not give up on man,
Yes.
as he said.
Yeah.
But right there, immediately, he had a plan of bringing man back to him. And he did make it happen.
Yeah.
So even today, in as much as we see so many things going astray,
Yeah.
if we come back to Christ,
Yes.
even in the picture that you had created of how people are not taking responsibilities in their families, men are not doing what they're supposed to be doing, women are not doing what they're supposed to be doing. Of course, the Bible also has something, it talks about children obeying their parents. God in his mercy is still able to restore and to bring healing in this institution of the family, so that every family that God has established might be what he intended it to be right from the beginning. So he never ever gives up on us.
Yeah. That's wonderful. I believe that God placing them in the garden was very symbolic. Yeah, when you see a garden, it's a place of flourishing. You know, it's a place of thriving. It's a place of blooming. You know, it's a place of excellence.
Normally, when we consider the picture of the Garden of Eden, we might fail to actually realize that there was an enemy who had an agenda.
Okay.
You know, and the agenda is still on. You know, and of course she's talked about the serpent having the head crushed. You know, and bruising the heel and all that. But the agenda that the enemy had from the original Garden of Eden is still an agenda he has till this particular
today.
time. And unless we identify what is the agenda of this enemy, then it becomes very difficult, because you really cannot fight an enemy who you don't understand. Or who you don't know, for that particular matter. And there are several things I can just point out quickly, and one of them is to mention that, number one, the enemy comes in to counterfeit. Now, God presents pleasure in the garden and calls a place of pleasure, but the pleasure is only realized by the presence of God, by doing the will of God, by hearing God, by walking according to his precepts. When the enemy comes in, he actually presents pleasure in a different facet. You know, where you can actually still have pleasure and maybe even excel in this particular pleasure by not doing what God said, minus God. And so even when man is, so to speak, cut off from the original plan of God, the enemy still comes in with deception, that you can still make it, you can still succeed with or without God being in the picture. And so then if you look at the dangers that we have and the challenges that families are going through today, and I think you talked about all these issues of teen sex, drug addiction and all this, really the hedonistic pleasures we have is really a substitute. And it doesn't match up. But because a human being was created and the first thing they had was a place where there was abundance and there was plenty and they were prospering. So they easily want to identify with that environment. So the enemy keeps on presenting falsehoods in the name of this looks like pleasure, but it is not.
Yeah.
You know, and so we need then to begin to understand that that's part of the agenda as we actually move forward to redeem our families and get them back to the original place that God intended, where we can have pleasure the way God wants us to have it and still do the will of God and excel in the glory and the presence of God.
Thank you very much, Pastor Othniel and Nancy, for joining us on the show. We have received so much insight and so much wisdom. It's been a delight having you on the show. And the viewer, I believe that you've received wisdom and insight on how to make our families flourish and how to make our families thrive. It's been wonderful having you on the show. Until next time, God bless you.
Thank you.